So first speaker in part 2 is the lovely Lisa Panford, who is going to be talking about diversifying the MFL curriculum. Good morning, Lisa.
Morning, Hannah. You hear me okay?
I'm really good, sweetheart. Looking forward to listening to you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a real privilege to have been asked to join the discussions today. I'd like to begin by centering race in this discussion around diversifying the modern foreign languages curriculum. And whilst I acknowledge the limitations of a colour-only approach to understanding any issue because of the multiple interactions between race, gender, class, faith, disability, poverty, sexuality, age, so on and so forth. Audrey Pantelis spoke to that incredibly this morning. There are also lots of really much needed advancements in other dimensions, like gender inclusive language in the MFL classroom. My present concern is with drawing attention to an area which remains underexplored in my subject. There's been until now a entirely colourblind approach to pedagogy and policy in modern foreign languages, and that's reflected by the gaping absence of research and critical engagement around race in our specific MFL secondary domain. Before I begin to talk about the secondary curriculum, which is the reason I'm here, I'll start with a bit of a disclaimer, and that's my positionality with regards to race and racism in MFL. It's a legitimate area of scrutiny because any work in this area of race and racism in MFL, for me, is both professional and deeply personal. And I want to be transparent about the fact that my work and approaches are informed by my personal and professional experiences. I'm also really unashamedly motivated by my conviction that we need to a broader debate on counteracting what I find to be racially discriminatory practices in our subjects and in MFL specifically. Previously, I've written about my personal interactions with our subject, not to speak for all Black teachers and all Black learners of MFL, but rather to show how by theorising race within the context of my own experience has helped me to make sense of my practice and life as a Black learner of languages, a Black teacher of languages, and now a Black teacher educator of languages. And so I draw on my nearly 40 years of lived experience as a Black woman in the UK, the majority of which has been spent in languages education, studying languages, in mainstream secondary, higher education, to tell me that our language classrooms, languages education, languages lessons, language curricula, none of these are racially neutral spaces. And I understand my own experiences as a pupil and teacher of languages in the context of wider institutional and structural systems in which we operate. And I find that various policy and curriculum decisions have conspired to effectively provide barriers for people who look like me to see themselves within our subject. I believe that current approaches and practices undermine the brilliantly transformative and liberatory potential of learning a language. And I believe in the need to amplify conversations around race and racism, and that an anti-racist and decolonized intervention is needed in order to realise what the Department for Education have themselves defined as the purpose of studying a language, which is an liberation from insularity and an opening to other cultures to foster pupils' curiosity and deepen their understanding of the world. So that's my disclaimer. Over 2 decades ago, when I was a teenager and left secondary school with A-levels in French and Spanish, I had then only a kind of vague notion of the wider French and Spanish-speaking world. So a few tokenistic anecdotes about Latin American festivals. And to be honest, I was under the utterly ludicrous impression as I began my university studies, not incidentally as the only Black languages honours student, that I was quite a unique speciality as a Black speaker of French and Spanish. Entirely ludicrous, of course, when you consider the fact that the majority of Spanish and French speakers are global majority and live outside live outside of Europe. Notwithstanding that, I feel like this misconception could really well endure in our pupils 2 decades on today. And you might ask how. I would say beyond the very grave issue, not beyond, one very seriously grave issue is around teacher diversity, and I think that's disproportionately stark in our subject. It's captured in the NFER report recently. There's the fact that even the name and the positioning of our subject as modern foreign languages entrenches some artificial and harmful dichotomization between usually French, German, and Spanish on the one hand, and so-called community languages or heritage language or home languages, which are kind of sidestepped and othered. Our curricula, which is the focus here, is driven by the outcomes, of course, presented in the GCSE and A-level subject criteria, and they both fail dismally to explore the rich socio-cultural, historic and political dimensions of our subject. Colonial underpinnings and legacies of French, Spanish, and to a lesser extent German continue to be unexplored. European literary texts continue to be centred by A-level exam boards. Eurocentric cultural examples are proffered. And while there's been significant recent efforts, and I'm aware of Pearson and Oxford University's Press, their work in this area, stereotypical and tokenistic representation of the global south continue to be commonplace in current textbooks, and as is visible on this slide. Black narratives were, back when I was a secondary student in the 90s, and today, virtually non-existent. And where they are present, they're consigned to areas of festivals, immigration, or poverty, as seen here. And that perpetuates essentialist, reductionist, and harmful misconceptions about the world. While the events in recent years, in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd, meant that there's been a sort of renewed emphasis, albeit well-intentioned, and a renewed commitment to diversifying the MFL curricula. Our community is absolutely awash with hashtag promoting diversity in MFL. A growing number of practitioners, myself included, find curriculum development centering diversification approaches wanting in our subject and often missing the mark. They're inadequate. In short, when we're talking about diversification in the context of MFL, we are referring to sort of well-meaning gestures that we may engage in to feel good about our lessons. So easy wins like showcasing Black French sports personality like Drogba, or doing a Day of the Dead display, and feel like our work is done. We find this approach wanting and problematic because of what it conceals and fails to address. What it conceals is an assumed neutral or normalized point, which is the white, the European, relative to which all others become diverse. And what it fails to address is race. So it's well intended, but it's also become how we talk about race in the classroom when we can't talk about race because it seems more polite and positive. So we can comfortably talk about the lack of diversity in the MFL curriculum when we can't speak of racism in the MFL curriculum. And I would posit that celebrating diversity with occasional references to Drogba, Day of the Dead and Djibouti does nothing deep to address the real concerns about racialized inequalities that are perpetuated by our curricula. On the contrary, one of the aspects that I find so hopeful about the decolonise agenda is the way that it explicitly addresses race, power, marginalisation by forcing us to counter and disrupt dominant narratives. And I think that's how we begin this sort of radical process of unravelling our children and ourselves with them, from what Jeffrey Barchi describes as the labyrinthine paradigms of power and privilege. Because it's helpful to have a theoretical framework to refer to. Broadly speaking, what I'm drawing on here are the tenets of critical race pedagogy. I think the work begins with looking within ourselves and our subject, so exposing issues of racism is uncomfortable and unpopular in most places. Maybe it's extra uncomfortable in the field of languages education, because by nature, I think it attracts people who have had international experiences and a willingness, often even a passion for intercultural understanding and sharing cultural insights to enrich learners' lives. But it doesn't make our field or our practitioners devoid of the responsibility to examine how racism or any other injustices influence our practice or ourselves. One space dedicated to explore the issues of race and racism and how it shows up within our subject is our Decolonising Secondary MFL Special Interest Group, a bit of a mouthful. Our members who are practitioners in schools, universities, and educational publishing and awarding bodies. So this group was founded by me and my colleague Melina Irvin, who's a teacher based in Bristol, over a year ago now. And I'll be honest, the precise shape of how this collaboration develops, we don't know yet. But we're really excited to be working across sectors with professionals who have committed to how we might collaboratively mobilise in the area of decolonising secondary MFL. Here we've got a space to explore our blind spots as language practitioners. Like, do we have assumptions around our own perceptions of our international outlook? To work collectively to think about how we might contribute to supporting teachers to be more confidently competent to take action in anti-racist and decolonised practices in MFL. We're discussing ways that we might work collaboratively with colleagues from other subjects, history, English. We know this work is being done by colleagues in different subjects. So, and there's a forthcoming article for BERA, I know, that's edited by Tara Glowich, who captures this sort of teacher-led decolonising and anti-racist work.
So I'm going to stop you there, Lisa, just because we've got to make sure we're going on time here. It is absolutely fascinating and has certainly made me think really deeply about this, because when I've been working on diversity in the curriculum, you know, we often talk about representation in MFL, and one of the things that comes back, you know, as it does in a lot of subjects, is, well, actually, we are so busy teaching the grammar, we are so busy teaching the vocabulary. What is the point? What is the purpose in ensuring that there is this exploration of you know, race and racism in the MFL curriculum? That's the provocation. What do you think?
I think it kind of comes back to this idea of what's the purpose of studying a language. And if we subscribe to the Department for Education that it's a liberation from insularity, then it goes way beyond linguistic structures and chunking of language. I think it's disingenuous for me to not acknowledge the fact that languages teachers, all teachers, but languages teachers currently are under huge pressure. Currently, the GCSE is being revised, so we're under huge pressure. And you know, I'm not suggesting that the onus should be placed on individual practitioners, kind of, you know, tear up resources and start again and design a decolonised curriculum. But I am suggesting that they're welcome to join us in the Decolonised Special Interest Group and explore ways that we can work collaboratively to improve the quality of languages education for all our pupils. And I really see this as I really see this work as about improving the quality of education. Sorry, for all our pupils.
Oh, brilliant! We've got a guest. I absolutely agree. And one of the things that is so important is to remember this: that things don't exist in a vacuum, and that with whichever subject you teach, there is a context, there is a history. You know, like you talked about the colonial legacy of MFL, and how do teachers? We've got about a minute left. So, how do teachers go about, apart from joining you? Where do they go to find out what they don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a really, I mean, there's been lots of work in higher education around, you know, around by a new generation of academics who are exploring Black narratives in languages, but there is a bit of a disconnect here between that and practice. I would always suggest that decolonizing work, anti-racist work, starts from looking within and interrogating your own practice. It's not about attacking anyone's identity. This is about looking within and seeing how racism may show up in you, show up in yourself, in your own classroom. And sort of, I heard you speak, Betty, and our colleague Shona Reed speak about leaning into the discomfort. And I don't think there is that really resonated with me, this idea of leaning into the discomfort. I don't think there is a meaningful way to work in an anti-racist and decolonizing way without acknowledging, without having some integrity about it, and acknowledging the fact that this is going to cause discomfort.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. I could listen to you all day. I'm sure we will catch up at some point to discuss this further. I do have to go to our next speaker though, but thank you so much.